Welcome back to These Things Are Written on this Thursday, getting closer to the end of the week. And this is usually where I tell you what we are going to be doing next week. And I guess it's time to do that. We are going to be looking at the book of Galatians, an amazing book. Only 5 chapters, but it is packed full. We'll be doing this book most of the month of August. I invite you to come back starting next week. I know it's still July. And then continuing on for the next 4 or 5 weeks as we go through this amazing book of grace and a call that we have to Christian freedom. Now, let's get back to the book at hand, Leviticus. The chapters we're looking at are chapters 23 through 25. I encourage you to read through all of them, either before or after, or maybe before and after, to get a better understanding of what we're talking about as a whole. Let's start with chapter 23, beginning with verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed feasts of the Lord that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. These are my appointed feast. 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwelling places. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, the holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the time appointed for them." So as we move into this and look at it, he then lists all the types of different feasts: the Passover, the Feast of First Fruits, of Weeks, of Atonement, the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Booths, and listing through all of those and what they were to do, the sacrifices they were to offer. Also, but as you look at these feasts, I want you to notice that there are really 2 types of feast. Those that are redemptive, that they point back to the redemptive work of the Lord, or thanksgiving, giving thanks to God for what he was providing for them. For example, Passover is a redemptive feast. It was a reminder of the bringing out of Egypt. The Day of Atonement was an actual day of redemption where their sins would be taken away. The Feast of Booths was also a reminder of the redemptive act of God, of how he led them out of the promised land. But yet the Feast of Booths could also be an understanding of the idea of Thanksgiving, because it was in response to a feast. It was in response to the harvest, I should say, the latter harvest. The Feast of First Fruits, which happened around the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, which was a week's worth of weeks, 49 days later. Those all were the Feast of Thanksgiving as well. There's one that kind of hits both along with booths, and that is the Feast of Trumpet. It's really a way of proclaiming the Lord as King, kind of his enthronement, you could say. And it, in a way, talks about his redemption, is about his redemption, but also giving thanks to God as the King. Let's continue with chapter 24, moving to verse 10. Now an Israelite woman's son, whose father was Egyptian, went out among the people of Israel. The Israelite's woman's son and the man of Israel fought in the camp, and the Israelite's woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed. Then they brought him to Moses. Verse 13. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Bring out of the camp the one who cursed, and let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. And speak to the people of Israel, saying, whoever curses his God shall bear his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him, the sojourner as well as the native, when he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death." Now, this is an interesting passage, a little bit of narrative thrown in, all of this discussion of the holy weeks and all, but yet it is important because those feasts were about the Lord, how holy and right he is. And now they were blaspheming, using God's name in the wrong way. And for that, God said, they should die. Makes me think about how poorly we treat God's name and how he desires it to be used and to be kept holy. Maybe we need to work on that, right? All right, let's move on. Chapter 25, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard." And moving to verse 8. You shall count 7 weeks of the year, 7 times 7 years, so that the time of the 7 weeks of years shall give you 49 years. And then you shall sound the loud trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement you shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land, and you shall consecrate the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee to you, when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you, and it shall neither, and you in it you shall neither sow or reap what grows of itself, nor gather the grapes from the undressed vine. A couple things here. First of all, the first few verses talk about the Sabbath rest being given to the land. Just as we need rest, the land needs rest to recharge and to be rejuvenated, is what they are showing here. And then the Jubilee year, a week's worth of 7 weeks worth of years. In other words, 49 years. On the 50th year was a Jubilee. The Jubilee would be a time when everyone who sold land would be able to return it, because land was important. It was about the family and the tribe who owned that land originally, and they were to go back to it. And if they sold the land early on, it would pay more than if they sold it with 1 year left in it, because they knew they would get it back. It was talked about being honest in that. Also, in the year of Jubilee, those who, Hebrews who were sold into slavery because of their debts, were allowed to go free. It was a reminder of God's redemptive work and the importance of that rest and of that restoration of the land, of our bodies, and of lives. Tomorrow we wrap it up. We'll see you then. God bless.